So let's talk about space.
In the 60s, there was this huge swell of excitement and this huge swell of progress. People at the time thought, we're going to have a moon base, we're going to have a Mars base, and this is just the beginning. And it seemed like it probably. They spent 5% of the federal budget on space for a couple of years in the 60s. And then it went in terms of excitement and ambition and progress. But the big thing is Mars. None of this is the reason SpaceX was founded. If you want the big story on SpaceX, SpaceX was founded because Elon, that's a huge hit to the dictators of the world. Because now if someone has a smartphone, you can literally get the internet whether the government likes it or not. It's a huge deal.
But what do you think?
I think we're there, and all we can do is wild guesses. I think we have no idea, and I don't think the people making it have any idea where it's going to go and what the downstream effects are going to be. But they're going to be big. If AI goes wrong, they could literally bring on the apocalypse.
Before you hear from the great Tim Urban, I ask, if you want to support this show, all you have to do is press subscribe. If you press subscribe, I can have more great guests like Tim Urban exploring the issues that you want to hear about. But without further ado, Tim Urban. Again, Tim Urban, such a pleasure to speak with you. I know how precious your time is. You're an unbelievably prolific writer, as well as the books, What's Our Problem? A self-help book for societies, and the story of us. You're the illustrator and publisher of the popular Wait But Why blog, and you have a huge social media following. Not only that, I understand you're writing a new book. I think audiences who aren't familiar through those channels will have seen your huge TED Talk, 57 million views on the speech Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Of course. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So let's talk about space. Now, I've been watching Musk's SpaceX on my Twitter, on my X feed, seeing these rocket launches. Only a few weeks ago, we watched him land a rocket, caught it with a pair of chopsticks. You've wrote this beautiful piece about bringing your daughter to watch it. And there was a few things in the piece that I found stimulating. On this topic, I should say in advance, you have to talk to me like I'm kind of like a 5-year-old, because apart from watching it, I don't really know space. I don't know what's behind the curtain. I don't know what's going on. So if you don't mind talking to me like I'm an idiot, that would be great. I'll start with an easy one. What is the significance of what we're seeing by SpaceX? What does this mean in the historical context?
Yeah, well, so I just think so. So when I think about space, I'm like, this is a little marble floating in this, I don't know, just endless arena. And if you're on the little marble, like maybe this whole arena is also interesting, not just the stuff on the little marble. Right? I mean, it's like space. There's we should all be thinking about space all the time. To me, it's like we literally live inside of it, and we're just on this marble in it, and it's just cool. And one of the things that we can do that no one could do until 60 years ago is go there, and people go out into space, and it's just so exciting to me. I grew up being like, oh my God, space, right? And then it disappeared. So what we had is in the 60s, there was this huge swell of excitement and this huge swell of progress. And then it went, people at the time thought, we're going to have a moon base, we're going to have a Mars base, and this is just the beginning. And it seemed like it probably. And then it went in terms of excitement and ambition and progress. And I grew up in a world where we were sending astronauts, right? If the Earth is a globe and this big, it's like we're sending them like half a centimeter away to go to the International Space Station and look back down, build things that will help us with Earth industries, satellites and stuff. And I was like, well, that's just so much less exciting. And the reason is, of course, the funding also has the same shape. The funding went like this because desperate times called for desperate measures. This is existential. We need to show the world that we're in a fight for our survival here against the influence of, a fight for influence. And so our reputation's on the line.
Against the Soviets.
Yeah, you're fighting not just for this, but your whole way of life. You need to show the world that this is how you want to be, not like that. And okay, so they spent 5% of the federal budget on space for a couple of years in the 60s. That is unheard of. Today, it's 0.5%, so a tenth as much.
There's an irony there that it's state-sponsored.
Yeah.
To defeat the Soviets, they're using state money to build
I know.
their space.
That's true. I mean, but it was politically feasible then because the country was caught up and had this fear of this existential thing and this excitement. They wanted to win. It was really tribal, and it was, it was a time when you could get away with that, and the politicians could do this, and people said, yeah, 5% of the budget. Now any politician would be laughed out. Even just trying to double it from 0.5% to 1%, it would be hard to justify that right now. It'd be hard to get to not be, have that be kind of a political suicide.
Well, on that note, and we'll come back to the broader story of space. What happened to NASA? Because it used to be, when I was a kid, having a NASA T-shirt was kind of cool. They were on the front line. What are they doing right now? I think I understand that they're still collaborating with SpaceX, but what is the state of NASA? What advances have they made?
Well, they don't have much of a budget anymore.
Are they relevant at all?
Well, they're still. So I'm not. This is not my area here to know specifically what NASA's doing, but NASA still sends astronauts up. So there is still a space program. They do, research and government funded things. I know the government still sends satellites up, and, NASA is still important, but when they had 5% of the budget, they were really important. They were really powerful. And once they lost that, they became just kind of like a neutered, government agency that couldn't do that much. And that wasn't even, they couldn't be that ambitious. They didn't have the money to, or the political will to be that ambitious. So they were kind of, executing missions. And by the way, in 2011, the space shuttle program got shut down. And from then on, we couldn't even send our astronauts 1 centimeter away from the globe to low Earth orbit. We had to use Russia for that. So this was like that was like the absolute dark age.
What do you mean we used Russia for that?
From 2011 until I think maybe 2021, the only way American astronauts got to the space station was on Russian rockets.
No way.
Yeah. It was only Russia and China were the only countries in the world that could send astronauts to space.
So 21.
And until I don't remember the exact year.
And so there's active collaboration between Russia and America on doing so.
There had to be, and it was very tense. And it actually was maybe affecting U.S. foreign policy because they couldn't piss Russia off too much because they needed them, because China was the only other option, and they were really not going to use China because that's even more of an enemy. So it was not good. That was the dark ages of U.S. space. And I because in that time, just like the people in the 60s thought, well, this is just the beginning. Living in that time, I thought it's over. I mean, this is we don't do space anymore, and who knows if it'll ever come back? Why would it? Doesn't seem
what a change from being in competition with Russia to now being at.
It's kind of
having to.
It's sad.
Yeah,
it really was. It was not. I don't think the U.S. should be proud of that. And
dare I say humiliating?
Well, and so there's two problems. One is that that again the space budget got cut tenfold. But secondly, NASA is not really, again, without some crazy 1960s situation, government agencies aren't usually going to be super innovative. And they're going to be probably more risk averse and less experimental. And so nothing major was going to change. They did the space shuttle program. I don't know how much they were working on other rockets, but really slowly. And they weren't huge leaps forward. And usually when you want innovation and you want giant leaps forward, what you want is private industry, right? That's where it almost always comes from. Except there's a huge barrier to entry. What kind of entrepreneur could start a rocket company? In fact, some people had tried and it was never successful. I mean, it's really hard. It just seemed like something that on that scale, only governments can do.
Yeah.
And governments aren't that innovative, and they don't have much money anymore, the U.S. ones. So
enter Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. Those Virgin Galactic, Blue Horizon, and SpaceX.
Yes,
Blue
Origin.
Blue Origin, excuse me, forgive me.
There are some others now, but there weren't. And I think, I don't know that much about what Richard Branson's doing. I think it's very exciting. I love his vibe. But what he was doing is more like tourist stuff, which I'd love to go on a Virgin Galactic thing sometime and go see the Earth from afar. I mean, it sounds amazing. I hope he keeps doing it. But SpaceX, as far as I know, was the first private company to start doing rockets in a way that was so legit that NASA signed a contract with them and said, we don't need to use Russia anymore, because we can use this company. When Elon started that company, very few people, especially people in aerospace, thought that ever could get to that point. Maybe this billionaire can, launch some rockets and, wow some people, but he's not going to be doing serious government level work. And I'm not sure he knew it was a long shot. And SpaceX is amazing. And what they showed is that actually with enough will and enough, private funding, a private space company can not only compete with governments, but can actually do something way exceed them.
Okay, so what's the secret ingredients to their success? Now, retrospectively, if you look back, why is it that they were successful compared to these other projects in NASA, these other businesses in NASA?
So, I mean, first, I think, Elon's really an impressive dude. He has a great engineering mind. He's great at hiring. And he brought in an amazing team. A lot of people from NASA, people who wanted more excitement. So I think the SpaceX team was very, very, very impressive. And I also think that one of the things that makes Elon is he reasons from first principles really well, which means he doesn't say, well, no private company's ever done it before, so it must not be able to be done, which is what all of us do. There's always been something only governments can do. It must be a good reason for that. He said, it looks like here's the math, what it would take, and I think we could do it. And then one of the things they wanted to do to revolutionize space is try to land a rocket. So imagine if every airplane, so you fly from New York to California, and once the plane gets over California, you all get in your parachutes and you parachute down to the thing, and the plane crashes into the ocean, and they build a new one for the next flight. Every coach seat would cost millions of dollars because you have to build a plane. You have to pay for the plane every single flight. Obviously, the reason that we all can fly on airplanes and that it's something that is a huge industry is because planes land and fly again. And they fly hundreds of times, if not thousands. So rockets were in this state before SpaceX. Every rocket flew once and then crashes into the ocean, and then they build a new one, which makes it prohibitively expensive where only governments could do it. And even launching a satellite into space is, so expensive.
So were they the first to recognize that was the primary problem? Or were others concerned with that or putting any time towards that?
I can't imagine they didn't think about it. It's such an obvious way to make this whole thing much more efficient and save money. And just, if you could do that, you would just be way more, even better space program than anyone else. I don't know the history of NASA and the Soviet program that well, but I'm sure they thought about it and tried. Part of the space shuttle was reusable, but not, the space shuttle itself, but like the rockets, the really expensive things there were not. The rockets themselves, just solid state. They burned, and disappeared. And again, talking about what makes Elon is, again, how many of us, if we started looking and saying, I think rockets could land, but then you think everyone is going to have this thought. If this could be done, obviously NASA and the Soviet Union would have done it a long time ago. Obviously, if they, with their tens of billions of dollars put into this, couldn't do it, clearly there's a reason. There's a good reason. Like, they didn't just not do it because I'm not going to be better than them somehow. That's what most people say. He just doesn't say that. He looks and he says, well, conventional wisdom is pretty dumb, and like government agencies are often not that creative. And like, I'm looking at the math here, and the first principles are the literally like the weight of the parts and the force of gravity and the atmosphere. If we can figure out how to do that, and he says, I think we can, worth a try. I think we can do it. So, they went for it. And then, Mark Juncosa, he brought in, Mark's this awesome guy. He like was a, kind of a college, near dropout. And then he signed up for the, car racing club, realized he had this talent engineer. Elon hired him, and he's like this genius who really was a big part of it. And they had this amazing team. SpaceX is thousands. Elon gets a lot of credit, but there's thousands of people, and it's a thousands of people effort that have done this. So 2015, they say 2014, they're trying to land, they're failing, it's exploding. And again, a government might just say, well, we don't have the political will to keep doing this, but it's a private company. They're not even, they're not even. How
were they affording to do that at that time?
So the first few rockets, Elon had to fund, and they were getting,
How could he afford to do that?
He just sold PayPal.
But he didn't get that much money for
PayPal.
he
got a couple $100 million around that. They had a very small rocket, and they got better at it. But even just when their first one, it was the fourth try. And I think they might have been getting close to the end. And
how much would each of those rockets roughly would have cost?
I don't know. But I know that
certainly tens.
I know that he, at least, what he says is that he was willing to basically lose all his money. So that's another thing, is that he has this attitude, like, I can make more money. Most people, I think, who make $180 million from PayPal's sale they're going to say, well,
I'll never be able to make that much money again.
I'll be on boards and I'll invest, but I'm not going to risk this money. I'm not going to pretend, I'm not going to be poor again.
Mm.
And I think he just thinks differently. I don't think he cares that much about, like, I think he thinks of it, he said once that he lived on $1 a day in college for a month just to show himself that this isn't that big a deal. Like, I can live on very little money. So he was willing to lose all of it, which is another thing that makes him unusual. And I think they were getting close to the end of that train when they successfully launched a Falcon 1, which is a really small first rocket. NASA saw that. NASA's desperate, I think, to not use the Soviets anymore, and they did a contract with SpaceX. They did an investment to fund more development, which of course has served them really well now. So now they start having funding, and then SpaceX starts to become sexy, and then they get more investors, and so I think once the momentum started and it became kind of this legendary company, and NASA was involved, I think then it was money poured in, because I think people started to see that this could be people. We might have all been wrong about space not being a private industry.
Okay.
So 2015, they finally land a rocket, and that year they landed, I think, a couple, and the next year a few. Now every rocket goes up, basically lands. They have like a couple mistakes a year, and basically it's like airlines. I mean, what rockets fly? I think their rockets fly dozens of times.
And with each rocket, the cost to put a rocket comes down as well.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it's
You're
coming down.
using rocket number 10 on its 57th trip. That's going to be way cheaper than using rocket number 10 on its one voyage.
Yeah.
And so this is the Falcon 9 now. So the Falcon 1 was their first little one that was basically just can we put stuff into orbit with this company? Do we know how to do this? Now, to be clear how hard this is what you're doing when you land is, if you just went straight up and kind of touched space and then came down, which they've done, that's like their grasshopper tests to test the landing. That's not easy, but that is, you're going straight up and you're coming straight down. It's very controlled. What a rocket launch is it looks like the rocket launches up, but actually if you zoomed out on the whole Earth, you'd see that what's happening is the rocket is launching sideways because it's trying to send something into orbit. So it needs to basically picture a huge giant, and he's taking a satellite, and he's going to throw it as hard as he can, so hard that before it falls, it's going around the Earth. That's orbit. It's just falling continually, but it's going so fast that it just keeps falling around the Earth. So what a rocket launch is it goes up and sideways. So to land a rocket, what you need to do is, there's a rocket and then the spaceship that has the payload on top. So it's two parts. So the rocket launches, it has to get all the way up, going really fast, and then send the second stage to do its thing. Now it has to turn around, has all this momentum, come back, and it's pretty high, so it's going to burn up in the atmosphere if it doesn't. It has to slow itself down, come back, and the way they describe it is, you don't realize, we think that the atmosphere is kind of, we feel the air, but it's no big deal. When you're going fast, if you even just driving in a car, put your hand out the window. If you're driving on the highway, and it's like, in a boat, it's like the atmosphere when you're going fast is an absolute force, and it's unpredictable. There's weather, there's gales. So this rocket is coming down in, it's like a pencil going up above the Empire State Building, sending something, and then coming back down and trying to land on a shoebox straight up. And if it even almost does it, but then falls, it explodes. So it's just one of the most difficult engineering challenges ever. And SpaceX, those thousands of people there, I think it was like 6,000 in 2015 or whatever, they pulled it off. I mean, it's just an amazing moment. And now they land rockets every single time. And so that's changed if you look at the cost per kilogram of payload, so if your satellite is 100 kilograms, how much does that cost to put into orbit? That's the key metric for if this is a viable space industry or not. And their cost per kilogram is significantly lower than the best Boeing, because Boeing also is doing the best Soviet, the best NASA ever before. I mean, it's just a total revolution. And when you bring the cost down, all of these new creative people start to say, well, I can afford a satellite now. What can we do up in space? Space becomes accessible. So that's all before Starship. I mean, and so if you want the big story on SpaceX, none of this is the reason SpaceX was founded. SpaceX was founded because Elon thinks of the human race as a incredibly valuable file on a hard drive. And if the hard drive crashes, the file is gone. So what would you do? You'd back up the hard drive. And he sees us, all of our eggs are on one planet. And so What he wants to do is say, look, if you're, the way I think about it is, if you're an alien and you're watching and you're rooting for us to go extinct because you have a bet on us going extinct, what do you not want? You don't want us suddenly living on 2 planets. Oh, damn, now they're spread out. It's going to be, both planets have to go, it's going to be hard. You want them all here and something awful to happen here. And then they're gone. So he's thinking, let's do the opposite. Let's divide, right? Let's distribute ourselves eventually to other moons in the solar system and, space colonies. That's way down the road. But just for now, we have this rocky planet that's 24 and a half hour day. Very similar. Our plants can grow there. Yes, there's some radiation, yes.
Our plants can grow there.
Well, in terms of the 24-hour day.
Right.
There's a lot of things, other planets have Venus has, their day is longer than their year. It takes many of our months to have one night turn to day. Mars isn't like that. It's a rocky planet that's cold, but it's not that cold compared to other places. It has radiation, but we could have technology for that. It doesn't have much of an atmosphere. We could terraform it over time. It's a big project, very ambitious, but a really advanced species would use that big rocky planet that's just there next to us, unused. They would figure out, and they would eventually. The vision is that we have millions of people there, and we're fully, it's a terraformed planet. It has lakes, and it's warmer, and it's just like how people move to the New World, or whatever. I mean, it's like that. It's like, and we look back in the days we were all on one planet as the old days.
Are they already working on terraforming it?
No,
because that's. I mean, how would you even get water there?
So there is a lot of water there already. It's huge. The poles are just huge ice caps. Tons of water on Mars. Plenty of water, and so you have water. You also have a lot of CO2. So what does that give you? Carbon, oxygen, and CO2, and hydrogen in the water. So with hydrogen and carbon, now you can make CH4. You can make, the hydrocarbons is what fuel is. So you can make rocket fuel and stuff. You have oxygen there. So you actually have...
We have the ingredients.
You have the ingredients to do a lot of the things we need. It would be a long process. First, it would just be an underground colony. Eventually, maybe a bubble that's protected from radiation that people can, a little earth bubble, like a fishbowl is a little bubble of ocean that they can live in on land. We would have a little bubble of earth. But down the road, again, maybe with enough technology, if you think about how much our world would blow away, it's Julius Caesar, or even George Washington. Well, the world of the future that might blow our mind just as much might have a terraformed Mars with lakes, and it's beautiful there, and it's a little cold, but it's like living in people who live in northern Norway now. It's it's freezing, but it's great. So that's the reason SpaceX was founded, was that we need to not have all our eggs in one basket, but you can't. It takes decades of R&D.
How far away are we from even beginning that? That's called the Starship project.
So all the stuff SpaceX did first was coming up with a business model that could fund the R&D for the big project.
Oh, okay.
So all of their Falcon 9 stuff, Falcon Heavy, things that take satellites to space or take astronauts, that's their way of coming up with a business model where they can both use that to learn.
I'd love to focus on the business model.
Yeah.
So you were saying earlier Elon was funding those first rockets.
Yeah.
At what point, or is it now a self-sustaining business?
Oh, yeah.
And when did it become self-sustaining?
I think once NASA got involved, I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that after those first few rockets, once NASA started getting involved and then other investment, I think, look, it was once they started being able to actually do deliveries to space. So 2012, 13, 14, they did very few. If you look, the number, it's very few. They'd only done, 7 or 8 or something total. But then 2015 more, 2016 more. And now, I don't know the exact number. I think they're getting either near 100 or over 100 a year. I mean, they're going to soon.
So they're putting satellites for private businesses into space.
Yeah, or for governments, or for the US. I mean, whoever. They're a space delivery business. They are FedEx that says we will take your thing and put it in orbit. Whether it's a person or a satellite, and that's extremely profitable. And because they can land the rocket, it's extremely profitable, and it's also cheaper for the customer.
Okay.
So they've created an extremely profitable business,
and that money is going into.
Yeah. Well, also they have Starlink now, so now they're supplying a huge amount of the world's internet, and it's going to be a bigger and bigger number. With satellite internet that can serve people in rural areas or out at sea or places that you don't.
Starlink's not a separate company, then it's part of SpaceX.
Part of SpaceX. I don't know if it's officially a separate company, but it's under the SpaceX umbrella. And is
Starlink self-sustaining at this point?
I don't know. I haven't done the deep dive there, but I know it's going to be profitable. I mean, they're going to be having. I would guess over 1 billion customers at some point, down the road.
Will Starlink replace traditional, as far as Wi-Fi can be traditional Wi-Fi?
I think no, because if you live in New York City, Starlink is so far away, the satellites. So by the time the beam gets down, it's over I don't know, a few square miles, a pretty wide swath, which is fine if there's not many people in that square mile. But if in New York City, for example, or any big city, you're going to have so many people using that site, it's going to be slow. So maybe way down the road, but I think the cities don't have a problem. We already have internet in the cities. That's not a problem that needs solving at the moment. All people in, places like that have populated areas, have good internet now. But how about all these people in, African villages or in Siberia or who are out at sea or who are in a country whose government is trying to censor them and not letting it? Well, you can't censor that satellite up there. Someone can get it, so someone can get a dish, or eventually what they're doing now is satellites that can go direct to your phone, so you don't even need a dish. That's a huge hit to the dictators of the world, because now if someone has a smartphone, which everyone does, I mean, so many people in the world have a smartphone, you can literally get the internet whether the government likes it or not. It's a huge deal. So, and also in that part of the business model, right? That's a hugely profitable thing that SpaceX can do, and they can launch their own satellite. So it's this vertically integrated business. But the big thing is Mars. And so that once this business was going, they learned to land the rockets. It's this thriving business. Then SpaceX got working on the big project, which was a much bigger rocket. It used to be called the Big Fucking Rocket, and now it got renamed Starship. And it is the biggest rocket's ever been made, bigger than the Saturn V, which was the previous biggest rocket. And
how big is it?
It's the height of a 40-story building. It's a skyscraper. So the rocket itself, which is basically the rocket's the thing that boosts through the really heavy atmosphere. That you need the really hardcore rocket to boost through Earth's atmosphere. That's called super heavy. That's like a 24-story building. Then there's a 16-story building on top of it, which is Starship, the spaceship itself, that gets thrown by super heavy into orbit or to Mars. On Mars, you don't need super heavy because the atmosphere is lighter. So you can just, Starship itself can launch off Mars. So you need super heavy on Earth to ping the Starship to Mars. It lands, and then when it's ready, it can come back to Earth. But it is something that's going to be a fairly, I think, luxurious cruise ship, zero gravity cruise ship. It's going to be kind of like fun. And
how long's the journey?
So I believe right now, like the best we could do is 9 months. But the idea is they're going to
doesn't sound like a very fun cruise to me.
But it's going to be better than that. They're going to refuel in orbit. And if you can refuel in orbit, because you have to use so much fuel to get out of the Earth's gravity well. If they can refuel, get a full tank there, they can, their estimates last I heard was they can get it to 3 months. And Elon has said eventually maybe down to 1 month. Now, people used to go across the Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean. It would take this, if you really are going to make a big move in your life, I'm going to go work over there for 4 years. You're okay, I'll do the month. I'll do the 3 months even.
Yeah.
And again, zero gravity cruise ship kind of could be an interesting novel experience. But Earth laps Mars every 26 months. So you can only go when they're close to each other. And then for 26 months later, they're next to each other again. You can go for a 26-month stint or a 52-month stint or a 78-month stint or whatever. It's in intervals of 26 months. And originally, the people going over will be mostly really hardcore, rugged engineers and scientists and people who are builders, construction, people who are going to go over there and build a little small city, and then eventually will become populated. And
a quick interruption to your show. If you would like exclusive content, exclusive interviews, and exclusive videos, come over to the Winston Marshall Substack. It's at winstonmarshall.co.uk, and there you can interact with me directly. It's winstonmarshall.co.uk, and you'll find links in the comments below. But back to the interview. So when do we expect this to happen? When's the aim to get to Mars?
So when I wrote about this for the first time in 2015, they were saying 2024 is our ambitious goal to have the first person touchdown. Obviously, that did not happen. Elon is, he usually, and I sympathize with this because I do the same thing with my writing. I'm always like, this is going to be done this chapter in a month, and it's always 3 months, but it helps kick my ass to do it in 3 months, not 8, to say it's a month. Anyway, so not to compare me writing a chapter of a paper of a book to colonizing Mars. Look, it's as awful for me to write this as it is for them to try to do that. It's equally hard, in my view. Writing is the worst thing in the world. Anyway, the point is that he always has these ambitious timelines, and said with now I feel like it's every 2026 is another chance, 2028. The first thing they're going to do is just try to send a starship to Mars, I believe, with cargo, and just, can that happen? Once they get confident, they'll send the first people, and then Neil Armstrong of Mars, whoever he or she may be, will touch down, and it's going to be a crazy big deal. Like if you step back, forget SpaceX. I mean, it's like, if you really zoom out on the history of life, there are a few really big moments. There's, going from single cell or simple cell to complex cell, with a nucleus. And then there's going from like single cell organisms to animals. That's a huge leap for life. Ocean only to like land, walking on land. To me, going from being on one planet to being on two is on that list. You can have, like, on one hand, leaps that big in 3.8 billion years of life. Like, we might in our lives, like, witness that moment when one primate species on Earth has managed to actually send people to another planet in the solar system, and especially if there can be a permanent, population there. That's wild. So I hope it happens. It would be really exciting. And
is that more momentous, you think, than getting to the moon?
Well, the moon was the first time any Earth life stepped on another heavenly body, so it's a pretty big deal. I think if we just go to Mars like the moon and, high five Mars and come back and then never go back again, I think it's probably, similar, and maybe the moon's a little bigger because it was first. But if we actually colonize it, meaning there's a cargo route, there's a colonial fleet that goes out every 26 months and another group that comes back, and it's just going. And now there's business opportunities, and suddenly, I'm going to open the first this on Mars, and I'm going to buy up land because it can be really valuable. And all these, really ambitious people start building stuff, and it becomes a thing, and it becomes permanent. Yeah. Then it's a way bigger deal, because, it's like the first fish to touch land, if they just went on to land and kind of high-fived it and went back.
Yeah.
That's a cool achievement for that fish, but it's not a great leap for life until we are permanently on land. And that's what I think they're trying to do.
What you called it? What, the space, the shuttle's called what? Forgive me, Starship. Where is Starship now? What's the latest? Has it had a launch?
Okay, so Starship is in Boca Chica, Texas, which is right at the bottom little point of Texas. And they started, their first launch was this year.
Huh.
They had launched the ship itself, like up and back down, but this year they started launching the full stack, 40-story thing. And the first one just kind of went up and they crashed into the ocean, and the second one, and I think they just had the fifth one. I was there. Anyone can go, by the way. You literally can go and just get a hotel on the beach and then walk down the beach to the edge and South Padre Island and watch, and it's incredible. Anyone, you don't need a ticket or anything. So they just did. So again, if they're crashing the ocean, rocket it into the ocean, which they need to just to test it out early, that's not a long-term plan, because no one can afford to build a new 40-story skyscraper every time you send something to orbit. So they need to land it, and their goal is not to land it just like this Falcon 9 just has legs come out and they try to land it on the ground. This thing, I think, is too big for that, so they're trying to catch it in, they call it the chopsticks. So it's these two huge bars, and the rocket has these kind of bars coming out of it, and so it lands and the things close and it kind of catches it there. And then it can lower it, and it's all nice, and they can do some of the eventual goal is they do a little maintenance and it goes back out an hour later, like a plane. A plane doesn't have to come down for 2 weeks. Plane gets some quick the maintenance check and it's ready for the next flight. That's the eventual goal, but right now they just tried for the first time to catch it, the 24-story super heavy, and they did, and it was ridiculous. You should watch the video on YouTube. It's amazing. Starship went all the way to the Indian Ocean and then crashed into the ocean, which was the plan. The next one will try go all the way around the world and also get caught.
Yeah.
And so what SpaceX is good at is, between each test, they get like hundreds of data points. They learn so much each test. So it's like, they're as efficient as possible, which again, private company is good at being really efficient. And between each launch, they're just a leap. It feels like they're years ahead of where they were because they just learned so much. They have so much data that comes back. They analyze it. They fix all these little things. They try a bunch of new things. They get a bunch more data from the next launch. So already in just a few launches, they're already landing this thing.
Yeah.
And it's the most powerful rocket ever made. It's crazy. So, by the way, Starship also down the road might be taking people from, Shanghai to New York, or Shanghai to, London to LA. And it would take 30 minutes to go from London.
Yeah, because we've seen there was a dramatic, like you mentioned earlier, it took a month, let's say, to take a ship across the Atlantic. Yeah. Maybe longer. We saw for a long time a dramatic shortening in time to travel around Earth. But for a while, it's kind of got stagnant, and that the shortening has stopped. I remember there was a brief talk about how you'll be able to cross. Well, there's the Concorde, of course, but then that came back. That's been it's no longer. They don't have Concordes anymore. But what's the latest on Earth travel? What can we actually expect? Can we expect to see a shortening? Will we be able to get across the Atlantic in an hour?
So technology grows in S curves. So there'll be, the iPhone comes out, it's like phone technology of Nokia and your flip phone and your BlackBerry, and it's kind of like stagnating a little. Then the iPhone comes out, and it's like all these companies build smartphones, right? And the App Store, and just this giant upswing of innovation and progress. And then if you've noticed, it kind of starts tailing off. The iPhone last year is about exactly the same as the iPhone this year. It's the camera has an extra thing. I mean, it's really disappointing, but it's also exactly what you'd expect because it's reached its maturity. So that's an S curve, right? It's the shape of an S, and that's how progress happens. So sometimes it feels like, everything's stopped, but it's because we're in this part of the S. Then something new will come out. Maybe LLMs just came out, and who knows what that's
we're actually in that part of the S.
Yeah, but the LLMs we're like right here. I mean, I don't even know what this is going to look like. Right. And also all the other industries that'll stoke. Or, I thought the Apple Vision Pro was going to be for VR, but it's not. It's not quite there. But something, Meta, something is going to be the VR one of these, and it just hasn't happened yet. So usually it goes like this, and then it goes like that, and it goes like this, right? And that's how progress grows. But talking to someone the other day who's in this industry, and he basically explained that airplanes skipped the last S.
What does that mean?
So the airplanes in like the 60s, should have had a big progress. I don't know whether it should have happened in the 70s or 80s, but there was a few decades ago, there basically should have been the next iteration of airplanes, and it just didn't happen. So we basically the airplanes are not really better than they were, I think 30, 40 years ago, like really, really a long time ago, maybe even 50 years ago. They're not materially like a huge leap better. And other industries have had a huge S in the middle, a huge steep part of the S, and airlines have just kind of stuck. And part of the reason seems to be, and again, I haven't done my full deep dive yet, but part of the reason seems to be that the Concorde did come out, and it was promising way better things. And actually, it was kind of loud, like the sonic boom. And I think that the U.S., it wasn't like an American thing. It was, I think, French. And they didn't like that it was going to hurt like American airlines. I don't remember the exact details, but either way, the U.S. basically imposed a speed limit over the U.S. and kind of killed it. And I think that's one of...
It was the famous crash in Paris.
I don't know. Maybe.
Right.
I haven't dug deep, but I know that there is a current speed limit that basically prohibits any kind of Concorde over the U.S.
Huh.
And for whatever the reasons, the leap that would have happened, it's like is as if we had all these new cell phones, and then as the iPhone was coming out, something basically made the law or cultural backlash against smartphones, and it never happened, and we're all still using, Razor flip phones now that are a little bit fancier than they were 15 years ago. That's what the airline industry is like. That smartphone that was supposed to come out hasn't come out, but that could be changing. I've met with a few companies that are doing ridiculously cool things, and maybe the promises are that it will be able to, at least while the speed limit isn't over the US is in place, go from like LA to Japan instead of in 12 hours, in like 4. And once the speed limit comes off in the US, because I think when people start to realize they could be going faster, they're going to want that. It'll become more politically popular to get rid of that. The sonic boom just isn't that big a deal. We would get used to them. then I think you'd start to be able to go like across the U.S., like New York to China in 6 hours. Crazy improvement there.
So, sorry, just a couple of bits that I just want to pick up.
Yeah.
You say skip the S. I don't fully understand what you mean by skipping the S. So,
Okay. So
what was the skipping?
So basically the I don't know again, I don't know.
Isn't it just a stagnation?
Yeah. So it's instead of going like boom and then another S and then another S, which is how
So you think we're going to go up to the second S?
Well, I think it's that it was going like this, and then normally when it should would have been time for another S in airlines, it just stayed like this.
Okay.
And another S, I think, is coming.
Another S is coming.
I do think it's now coming.
And then you mentioned you spoke to some companies.
Yeah.
Which is this nothing to do with SpaceX, right?
No, nothing to do with SpaceX.
Is this a private endeavor?
It is a private
secret endeavor?
No, it's not secret. I'm just forgetting the name right now. It's a supersonic jet company that I just had a great chat with the CEO, and I don't think it's secret.
And so they're continuing what they're sort of in the spirit of is it anything to do with what Elon's done then, or space travel?
Boom Supersonic. Talked to the head of Boom Supersonic, and basically it's looking like the technology is there to make much faster planes, much faster, and it's just a matter of perfecting the technology and getting some regulations. And it seems like we're on the verge of a huge leap in space, in air travel, which is a huge deal, changes the world. I mean, their eventual goal, so they also can be, once it starts, they can be maybe like a little bit of Moore's Law where the speed doubles and doubles and doubles for a while. Their goal is you basically can get anywhere in the world in a couple hours.
Wow.
And if you think about what that would do, if you could just say, your friend is having a party in Tokyo tomorrow night, and he lets you know, and you say, okay, you know what? I'll finish work a little early, and I'll come out for the party, and then I'll leave the next morning, and I'll get home. I mean,
that's crazy,
world changing, right? Like pretty crazy, world changing stuff. And I think that is potentially going to happen. Now, Starship also, I don't know when this will happen or if it'll happen, but they've also said that they will be able to launch people in 30 minutes around the world. Maybe it'll be used for military.
Yeah, so I'd heard of that before, that the way to shorten Earth travel would be through rockets, speed you up.
It's one way.
Run.
You also can have faster planes that go higher and faster.
So Boom is kind of like a faster plane.
Boom, and I think there's got to be other companies too. But rockets, I mean, a rocket is a huge thing, but if you can get all the way up there, if you think once the rocket's up, it takes a while, you get up and it's this big thing. Once it's up there and starts going sideways, it flies. It goes around the world. And for example, they gave time estimates, and I think it's London to New York in 29 minutes, but then they said London to LA 32 minutes, only 3 minutes longer. So the point is, getting up is what takes a lot of that time. Once you're going sideways, stopping in New York versus going all the way across the US adds 3 minutes. So wild, like.
Sorry, you might have said this, but is SpaceX specifically going to? Are they working on this?
They have. If you go on their website, you can watch videos of it. They say that this is one of their ambitions for the future. I don't know what the status of it is. I don't know if they're actually working on it. I don't know how serious they are about it. But they if you ask them, they will say that's what we plan to do this.
Because presumably, if you're trying to keep to a business model, this would be something that has a huge appeal. Whereas getting to Mars, and I mean, I'm sure they'll find businesses there, but this would be immediate return.
Yeah, well, that's why they're trying to, all these things that are good business models they're doing, but the Mars goal is they're not doing it because of the business model. They're doing it because of what it means for the future of the species. Eventually, if they create a cargo route to and from Mars, all of this technology exploded in the 1400s once. In the 1500s, once there was a cargo route to the New World. They discovered the New World, and now so the ships that Columbus used were barely better than the ships Julius Caesar's time were using, because there just hadn't been that much. Suddenly, 200 years after they discover, after the Europeans discovered the New World, there were huge leaps in ships, and so there's all these reasons to all these business. Now, maybe you could say that makes more sense. That's another part of the Earth. Mars is a ridiculous, but it could be the same. Once there is actually, okay, you know what? There's a reason to go there, and there's research that's being done there, and there's people who want to just buy up land, because maybe it's like buying up land in Times Square in 1720, and your family is going to be rich forever because who knows? But Elon's thesis is if you create the way, there'll be a will.
Yeah.
So just his job is create a way, and then then there'll be a will.
So he's pulling us out of the top flat of the S into a new.
Well, yeah, I mean, with space travel, I mean, landing a rocket was a huge one of these.
Yeah.
In terms of just, and I think it's still early in that I think other companies aren't really fully landing yet. I mean, I don't know the status, but like, it cuts down the price of flying by over 10 times. I think maybe even 100-fold. It cuts to 1% to launch if you don't have to build a new rocket. So, I mean, that's just, think about what that does to it's like building the integrated circuit for computers when suddenly, instead of being in rooms and being huge, they could be tiny. Yeah. I mean, that started Moore's Law. It changed everything. So I think that landing a rocket is on that level of like innovation.
So look, we hear Elon Musk's name all the time. Are there other unspoken or unheard of geniuses behind this? It can't just be him.
It's not. He's the first person to say. As I said, I mentioned Mark Junkosa.
Yeah.
SpaceX is home to, I think, dozens of the best engineers on the planet.
Who are they?
Well, again, I don't know them all. I know a few that I interviewed a bunch of them back when I first was doing it. So I don't know who's still there and who's not. But as I said, it proof is in the pudding. I mean, the fact that when you watch this rocket go up and then come back and land, that could only be the work of hundreds, if not thousands, of unbelievable talented people who are also just crazy dedicated to this mission. It's like, the same thing. I don't know the details of how the Saturn V was built, right? I don't know how what happened exactly behind the scenes when the moon landing, but I can tell you for sure that hundreds of the best minds in the world made it happen. So, SpaceX is again, it's a group of thousands of people that are singularly dedicated to this mission and willing to work really hard for it. And the results are incredible. Like they did something that the U.S. and Soviet Union, with all their billions, never ever could do.
Yeah, hearing you talk about this, it's so exciting, and I can't help but think the significance of Elon Musk being at the spearhead of this, or certainly one of the most important people involved, if not the most. And yet he is so hated by a lot of mainstream media in my country as well. The British left can't stand him. They can't see all of this, and you often see ridiculous tweets or posts on Twitter, on X, saying he's an idiot. Like, it's so obviously demonstrably not true. Do you have insight into why he is so unpopular? Is it tallest poppy syndrome? Is it jealousy? Is it that I don't quite. It's so obviously exciting for humankind what he's doing in his. By the way, we're only talking about a couple of his endeavors here. There's several others we could, and some of them you studied, like Neuralink. Why is it that it provokes such? I mean, it's like a derangement syndrome.
Well, look, he's gotten vocal about politics, so that's always gonna, in a time of crazy political tribalism, that's gonna win you a lot of enemies, right, and a lot of friends. Now, like, just like so to say, for someone to say they don't like his politics, or they don't like the way he talks about politics, fine. It's like, you don't like his politics. To say what I think the smear often is that he's not even these companies succeeded in spite of him, not because of him.
Yeah,
it's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true. I've talked to enough of the engineers there. I've talked to many. I interviewed dozens of engineers at his companies and employees during this SpaceX and Tesla days, and like, they were, if anything, they're impressed by how much actual hard science knowledge he actually knows. And he in the shower comes up with this insight to use methane fuel instead of kerosene fuel, and like, he's very involved. And it is partially his big vision, his big vision and his ability to bring money in for it, and the reasoning from first principles that he does, that I think is at the core of the spirit of these companies. So that I just disagree with. And I think when you choose to get involved and become vocal about politics, you are accepting that. I think he's not. I wouldn't say he's probably surprised by what has happened, but he decides that for whatever reason that's worth it for him to do. And I think that. But I think when I see the smears about his actual involvement in these things like SpaceX and stuff, it's just not true.
It's ridiculous.
No, it's not true.
So one of the things I picked up from your essay on witnessing the launch, and maybe it's a bit of a side point, but it was a psychological observation, which, and you have touched on this in other parts of your work. As you described, there was the space race and the Soviet Union, and the whole race was psychologically, the motivation was, we've got to beat those other people. This time, aside from the economic difference, or rather the fact that it's state sponsored rather than individual private sponsorship, this time it's not against anyone else. It's not in competition. It's not even really seemingly in competition with Bezos or Richard Branson. It's a positive. It's like we're going to do this for really us, for ourselves. Did you notice that? And is that a way of showing the difference between positive motivation and negative motivation?
Yeah, I think sometimes zero sum competition can breed like a lot of innovation and like the moon landing was amazing, and it came out of a zero sum competition. I think that the only thing better than a rocket launch that's happening because of competition is a rocket launch that is happening for like I think the two best reasons ever. Elon cites that he wants to, provide life insurance for the species by having us on two planets. That's such incredibly noble. Whether you agree with it or not, I mean, it's a great reason to do something. And the second reason he always cites that people I think forget about is he says this would be the greatest adventure in history if we can colonize Mars, if we can put people on Mars. It would be, he says it gives you something to wake up for in the morning. You just wake up and, you're excited to be a human. You're excited to be alive. And I think that's a great reason. It's especially in culture war times, it's like that's so the opposite of how we think. It's like everything is because, we have to protect the thing from the awful, evil people. And it's just so petty and so zero sum. And I think this idea that we should just be excited to be humans and that it's like okay to be optimistic. And, culture war is so pessimistic, so cynical. And there's so much like, anger and hatred. And it's like, rocket launches, again, SpaceX or NASA or anyone else, a Soviet rocket launch. To me, the reason that people get emotional at rocket launches, my wife came with me. She doesn't care about space 1% as much as I do, but she was in tears.
Yeah.
It is emotional watching a rocket launch, and it's because you're in awe of your own species, and it just that's a great feeling, and it makes you feel high minded. It makes you just want to hug someone, another fellow person, and be like, "We're amazing," and like, "I love you," and like, "How great is it?" I mean, it's great. It's a really nice feeling that we don't get enough right now.
Yeah.
In times of both. I think both peace. I think war makes people feel like that about their tribe, and also culture war. So it's this really bad.
Well, you have the whole world watching. I mean, I know all watching on Twitter. It does unite the world.
I'm sure the moon landing, maybe with the Soviet Union as an exception, although I'm sure even some people there were in awe. But I'm sure the rest of the world was forget the Cold War. Like, wow, And so that's why I love space, and achievements in space is that it is the antithesis of culture war, pettiness and cynicism and pessimism and zero sum and the greatest adventure in history. I just want, I mean, how much would if you have a child who's 7, wouldn't you rather them thinking about the greatest adventure in history and thinking about how awesome we are and learning about rockets than going with their teacher to a protest because they're being trained to think that the country is awful that they live in because those evil people. I mean, it's so obvious, right? I mean, it's like, so again, I have a little daughter now. She's 1.5. She's not especially sentient yet, but I really want her growing up in a world that feels like exciting and full of possibilities, and where she thinks that other people, especially people who think differently than her, are also full people, and everyone deserves love. Everyone is, yes, there's going to be conflict, but like that's the exception to the bigger rule. I mean, that's how I want her thinking. Yeah. And so a rocket launch was symbolic for me to take her there for, she doesn't know what's going on. She didn't like the sound. It was too loud. But
wouldn't it be great to show in all schools across America? They should be showing these launches, because what could possibly inspire a child more?
I mean, that's...
they probably did that at the time of the moon launch.
Definitely. I mean, even when I was a kid, we watched the space shuttle in class, and it was so not political.
Yeah.
And so if we put people on Mars, I think it's going to, some people said to me, I was saying it's going to be amazing because it'll just be such an amazing moment. It'll be uniting. It's going to be it'll be an antidote to tribalism. It'll make it something. We'll all have something bigger to think about.
Yeah.
And someone was basically like, I don't know. I think the culture war so bad that it'll be framed as like, I don't know, some Elon Musk's narcissistic pursuit at the cost of things that we should be working on. That's like you really have to be in a tribal mindset to frame something like that. So I don't and again, it's a straw man because I don't know anyone who's gonna.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen, but like that would show what a bad place we're in if like people can't even unite over the moon landing.
Tim, do you have insight into the philosophies of the tech bros, the tech world, Silicon Valley? One thing I observe from an outsider is it seems that we have a lot of sort of autistic dork former coders who are maybe post-humanist or transhumanist, and I don't mean to be rude about it because I have huge admiration, certainly, for some of the people we've talked about. I don't mean it as a slight, but I'm curious by what the motivation. I mean, we've explored some of Elon's motivations, but what are you've referenced different periods in time. You might say, well, they were Christians, or what is the philosophy going on? Do you think in these realms, these worlds?
Well. So I see there's a range. For AI for a while, I think was not especially tribal. It was, people disagreed, but it was very.
I don't mean political.
I know.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I mean like who's their god?
Yeah. Well, so, I think there's a lot of atheism, right? And I think that. I think there are some. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not. Here's what I was going to say: is what I notice is that I see a divide forming between people who say we need to accelerate and go to like as fast as possible, and progress and AI and stuff like that, and then other people who say we need to proceed with caution, and they each think each other is crazy. The people who want to go fast see the people who want to proceed with caution as, of course, because they want to do regulations that'll block out competition from small competitors so the big tech can just have a monopoly, and they're also going to slow things down at a time when our lives could be saved by if we had enough technology here. We could all live as long as we want and things like that. And these people are terrible. And then the people who want caution say we're building a thing that's smarter than we are. Like, if there's anything to proceed, they don't want to. Most of these people don't want to decelerate. That's a smaller group that I think all those people disagree with. They don't want to decelerate, but they say we should absolutely proceed with caution and not go as fast as possible because we're building something smarter than us. Like, that is the biggest invention we will ever make.
And there's some characters who fit. So as you speak there, I think of the moratorium. I think was last year on AI. Development, and it was signed by Elon Musk himself. That needs to be a moratorium on the development of AI until we get a grip of where it's going. So it's possible that those people can want to accelerate and want to pause things simultaneously.
That's what I said. People who I'm talking about want caution. They don't want to stop. They also don't want to get behind China or whatever. So they want to move still. They just don't want to get into a full space race where you throw caution to the wind. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Forget caution. We need to win this. Let's just go full speed ahead, because you're literally could be building like an eternal dictator that we can't. Once it's something smarter, we're a little bit smarter than chimps, and we could just wipe them.
Are you talking about AI when you mean the smart?
AI.
Okay.
AI is what I'm talking about in particular, but also really intense biotech that could turn into bioweapons if we're not careful. The same technology could be used to make bioweapons. There's a lot of really intense technologies happening right now, but AI in particular is the one where I see a real divide forming with how slow and fast we should go. Now, you could argue that the people who I think it's like the EAC community on Twitter. It's the just fully go.
What does EAC mean?
I think it's something acceleration. I don't know if it's like effective acceleration or something, but
okay.
It's just the people who want to go as fast as possible and like full techno optimist to the max. You could say that they in some ways like technology is like a godlike figure for them, but I don't want to put words in their mouth because I don't know I don't know.
Okay.
They're the deeper philosophical things, but they are very, Mark Andreessen is kind of famously one of these, who just says, they think that the people who want to slow down, either they're misinformed or they're malicious, but it's not a good idea. And then the people who want to proceed with caution think these people are very reckless with something that they don't have the right to be reckless with, because it's not just that they're going to blow up California. They could literally bring on the apocalypse.
Yeah.
If AI goes wrong.
Do you think there's anything legitimate to that? You're such an optimist. What are your concerns of AI?
So they talk about P-doom. How likely do you think the AI apocalypse is? Is it 1%? Is it 80%? Is it, I know people, very smart people.
Eliezer Yudkowsky would be a famous example.
I've spent hours speaking with him.
He's fully black-pilled.
My friend UnTOLD, who's one of the smartest, most reasonable people, is very, very pessimistic about if we are on the same path we're on, it's not going to end well. Eliezer is pretty much convinced that it's not that he knows how it's going to happen. The way he says it is I don't know how the AI chess player is going to beat me, but I can tell you they're going to beat me. Right. And I know he would say that even if most of the AI is programmed in a way where it won't do something bad, all it takes is one, and it's going to be this evolution where the AIs that are most ruthless are going to shut down the AIs that are less. It's like evolution. You're going to end up with, even if most AIs are good and reasonable and trying to do the right thing, all it takes is one. So that's their, and it's, when you talk to them, it's very compelling that, like, one question that I think they have still is that, but will it take longer than we think? And that would be a blessing for them, because they say that would give us more time to do it safely. Hopefully this is a harder problem than we think it is, or than it seems like it might be. The explosion of LLMs makes them worried, I think, that, oh man, this is coming quickly.
Right. Do you buy any of their black pills? What
I certainly so. I have talked to people who I feel are significantly smarter than me who think that, and also people who I think are significantly smarter than me who think they're crazy and think that they are totally over the top and lost in this, and that this is going to take a lot longer, and there's so many reasons why it won't cause an apocalypse, or even, less so, will these tools undermine all video evidence and undermine the deep fakes, and suddenly there's no one who knows any truth, and it starts to sway elections to the point where you can't have elections, and it just sets us back to the Stone Age, where our civilization crumbles because the liberal House, will it undermine the foundation of the House? That's a lesser but still terrifying. If we actually ended up in that world, we would all be dreaming about coming back to 2024 and say, remember when we just lived in this beautiful civilization and we were complaining about, like, oh my God, imagine we did not know how good we had it. That could happen too. And then other people, the techno-optimists, they say this is almost certainly going to be positive. Like all the other tech, they compare it to the Luddites didn't like the loom, and you have all these examples of people who thought this is the end of what are we going to do with all this farm equipment, and it's going to put farmers out of a job, and the electricity comes around and people didn't like it. And they say these are just the new version of that. All these other things have proved to be, even though there's some bumps in the road, have proved to be a huge advance for civilization and for prosperity. And they end up being a huge net positive. The internet, so there's some bad things, but it's probably a net positive. Do we really want to go back to the world without the internet? I'm sure some people would, but they would say most people wouldn't.
But what do you think?
So this is an example of, I would put like another, like whether they're aliens or not, right? It's another one of these questions where I don't have an opinion, because what I see is incredibly smart people who are here versus here versus here, and I'm less informed than any of them. So all I can do, and this is what
map it out.
Yes, what I can try to do is, what are the camps? What are they saying and why? Make the Steelman. What's the best case for each of these?
Okay.
What are the flaws that each of them point out in the others? And then that's my job. That's what I did with AI the first time I talked about it. I wrote a big AI post in 2015 that went really viral, and all I did was try to say, here are the camps. And same with aliens. Some people, smart people, think there's got to be lots of other alien life, and then other people think we're alone. Huh. And all I do is say, here's what they think and why. And I can have a hunch, but it's not interesting to hear my hunch, my much less informed hunches. And
I find it interesting.
Well, they switch based on also who I'm talking to last. Look, so my less interesting opinion.
Stop putting yourself down. I won't have it.
It's the same way that if you ask me about what's better to use, kerosene or methane as rocket fuel, and I talked to someone Elon, who thinks methane is better, talk to someone who thinks kerosene is better. I can present their views, but me to say, oh, that thing guy's right.
But precisely because you're so composed and trying not to be taking account, that's why your opinion is interesting.
I would steal my friend Igor's line here, which is he says, Igor Kurganov, he says that he deep down in his gut feels like it'll all be okay with AI. And the reason he thinks that is because he was held as a child. So he just in general is this mentally healthy person who feels like the world's good because he had a good life. And that's true. I feel the same way. I feel like it'll probably be fine. I'm like, why do I think that? Deep down, it's because I have a good view of the world and I think life is good and I think that the future will be good. And I don't think that is a very valid position because it is just based on my personality, not on my information. Look, the really strong argument for optimism is what they say is look at the past. People are scared of technology. Always there's people saying this exact kind of thing. This is going to be the end of us, and it always ends up being fine. And the strong argument against it is, none of those other technologies was a brain that was smarter than humans. They were things like the loom, and they were things like cars and tractors, and this is very, very, very different. And that we shouldn't apply history to this because it's just different. So I
one thing is for sure, it's that tech changes everything. And there's a famous quote, Andrew Breitbart says, politics is downstream from culture. I'm of the opinion that politics and culture are downstream from tech. And so I wonder what you think those changes might be. Do you have any predictions there?
I totally agree with you. I mean, computers and the internet, you can draw a straight line from the invention of those things to so much of what's going on.
Look what happened after the printing press.
Right. Exactly.
Look what happened after industrialization.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Industrialization was, we suddenly lived in a totally new environment, and our human nature reacted to that environment with different behavior. Human nature is a constant. The environment is the independent variable, and the behavior is what comes out. And you put this constant into this variable, out comes behavior that reacts to it. And so tech is our environment. Think about electricity before and after. I mean, someone living in 1910 versus 1980 in a house just feels like different centuries in terms of the world they live in. Anyway, so LLMs right now is an example of something that it's like, I don't think any of us quite realize like how big a deal it is. I just using it, I'm like, this is new. This is different. This is not like a better Google search. It's different. And it's just, we're early. So it's like, what is GPT-10 going to be like?
Grok's been fantastic. I mean, I much prefer Grok to ChatGPT. It seems gives me a lot better, thorough answer.
And it's very quick. And less biased. Instantaneous. Yeah. What I do right now, because I'm still testing them all out, is I have Grok, Claude, Perplexity, and GPT just open, and I'll just like throw something in. And I think Grok might be most consistently the best one, but I think they all blow my mind.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm asking about something specific with politics, I might especially want to see if there's bias. But I'm usually asking something like, what are the downstream effects of the discovery of general relativity? It's something that's not politicized. But it's like I think it's one of these really it's just this really early new thing. It's probably like, I feel like we're in 1994 and like the first chat rooms are online. Now, if someone told you, the first, you're using AOL chat rooms in 1995, and maybe you can send an email. Someone says, okay, predict, 2015. And are you going to say, well, there's going to be mobile devices where you'll access all this, and then there'll be apps and people do banking on this, and then Uber. It'll be, you'll just call a cab. No one's going to, it's like, who could have predicted Uber when you first saw the internet? Or even when you first saw the smartphone, right? Who is going to, the way, or social, when Facebook starts, who's going to predict that it ends up being politically important, right? It's just, so I think we're there, and all we can do is wild guesses. I think we have no idea, and I don't think the people making it have any idea where it's going to go and what the downstream effects are going to be, but they're going to be big. I mean, we're all going to have access to an extremely powerful brain that can be tailored to our needs. And then, it's huge. I don't think any of us are really quite qualified to predict how it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, on that note of wonder, Tim Urban, thank you so much for speaking with me. I love that. It was a wonderful introduction and broad cover of space. And for me, as a newcomer, that was fascinating. And I loved your insight in AI.
Great talking to you, and your curiosity makes it fun to talk about all these things. So I appreciate it.
Where can viewers and listeners find you? What are you excited about next?
Yeah, my blog, Wait But Why, is where I do my writing. It's been a little while because I'm working on a book, but you can also find my book on the sidebar of the website, which is where I talk about all the liberalism stuff and all the way that our country got to be the way it is. And I'm on Twitter as Wait But Why. So those are the places where I do. Yeah.
Tim Urban, a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for watching The Winston Marshall Show with Tim Urban. If you enjoyed that, if you want to hear more great guests like him exploring the issues that you want to hear about and that the mainstream media will not touch, all you have to do is press subscribe. But for now, be well.